A large portion of the Jewish nation has returned to its homeland, but the heart, soul, and mind of much of the Jewish nation are still in exile mode. This state of affairs must and will inevitably change. This is Torah Nation TV from Jerusalem, and we are speaking with the head of Machon, Shilo, Rabbi David Bar-Hayim. Shalom, Rabbi Bar-Hayim.
Shalom.
In our previous interview, we were discussing correct pronunciation of Hebrew. Can the Rabbi please continue to explain the consonantal sounds of our ancestral language?
We have the letter Qoph. Qoph and not Kaf. In Hebrew we have a straightforward K sound, which is the Kaf, which everyone knows how to pronounce, and then we have a Qoph. A Qoph is a deep sound which comes from the very back of the throat. It is also known in other Semitic languages, such as Arabic. And in fact, for many people, I would say this is really the most difficult letter to pronounce. In fact, my teacher, Rabbi Ben Sion Cohen, said to me that he has found that this, for people who are not used to these sounds, find the Qoph the hardest to pronounce. But in fact, like as with everything else, practice makes perfect. And there is a clear distinction between the Kaf and the Qoph, and it can be understood and heard clearly when people who know how to make this distinction speak Hebrew, as one can hear the distinction very clearly when Arabic is spoken by Arabs. One can hear the Kaf and one can hear the Qoph, and they are not one and the same sound at all. After the Qoph we have the Resh. The Resh, correctly pronounced, is an R sound in English, but as we know, an R, if you take the Latin alphabet, the letter R is pronounced in different languages which use the Roman alphabet in different ways. We have the English R, we have the American R, we have the French, which turned the letter into a sound which comes from the throat, which is like the word bonsoir with the R at the back of the throat. And we have an R sound, which is a trilled R sound from the front of the mouth with the tongue just behind the front teeth, as in Spanish, for example. And it so happens that the pronunciation of the R in Spanish or in Italian and other languages is the correct pronunciation of the Resh. And that is also how it is pronounced in Arabic, and that is how it should be pronounced in Hebrew. And this has always been the traditional pronunciation of the letter Resh amongst Sfaradim and Temanim. Amongst Ashkenazim, due to the fact that in Central and East European languages, in fact also even Western European languages like French, but particularly Central European languages like German, and East European languages like Russian, there is an R sound which is formed from the back of the throat, similar in some ways to the French R. This is how it is in Russian, for example, etc. And therefore, this became the dominant pronunciation amongst Ashkenazim in those languages. This, in fact, is a very clear mistake, as we will point out perhaps another interview where we explain how we know from which part of the mouth the different letters are to be pronounced. For now, we'll just say that the Resh is definitely to be pronounced from the front of the mouth, just behind the front teeth, and not from the back of the throat. Following the Resh, I should also mention before I continue that the Resh is also one of the 7 letters with a double pronunciation. However, it is not like the other 6. Technically, we have 7 letters: Beged, Kaporet, Bet, Gimel, Daled, Kaf, Pei, Resh, and Tau, as mentioned explicitly a number of times in Sefer Yotzirah, as we mentioned, which is an ancient, very ancient Jewish text, as Rav Saadia Gaon mentions in his introduction to his commentary on that book. However, as opposed to the 6 of those 7, the Beged, Kefet, Bet, Gimel, Daled, Kaf, Pei, and Tau letters, which constantly interchange between the soft and the hard versions of those consonants, between Beth and Veth, or Daled and Daled, or Kaf and Chaf. This is something which occurs all the time in Hebrew, both in biblical Hebrew and even in modern Hebrew. And everyone recognizes these facts by the fact of whether a letter is a kaf or a chaf by the absence or presence of the dagesh, or the dot. In the case of the resh, one should know that this is a very rare occurrence in the entire Tanakh. It occurs a handful of times, and there is even some discussion as to the correct pronunciation of the resh with a dot in it. Apparently it is simply a more stressed and more trilled resh sound, so it's not just a simple resh but a r like that. So in the case of in Sefer Shemuel, the beginning, we have the words ba'avur har'imah. The resh there appears with a dot. Apparently it is to make sure that the resh is pronounced correctly because of the ayin which follows, which would tend to sort of swallow up the resh sound. So instead of ba'avur har'imah, which doesn't really, the resh doesn't come out very clearly, you say ba'avur har'imah and everything is very clear. But this only occurs a handful of times, and therefore technically it exists, but practically one can put that more or less to the side. Another point regarding the letter resh. As we've said, the correct pronunciation is resh from the tip of the tongue just behind the teeth, as opposed to a guttural R sound produced by the back of the tongue near the throat. In Sefer Yetzirah, the Jewish alphabet, the Hebrew alphabet, is divided into 5 groups of letters depending upon the part of the mouth from which these sounds are produced. So let me read it to you briefly. The letter resh is lumped together in one group with the letters zayin, samech, sodeh, and shin. And with resh, that gives us 5 consonants. What do these have in common? As the book goes on to explain itself, these are produced, the sounds are produced with the tongue just behind the teeth, behind the back of the teeth, of the front teeth. So if you imagine for a moment saying a zayin sound, you have to have your tongue just behind your front teeth in order to say z, and the same is true for saying a samech, a s, an s sound. And the same, of course, is true for a shin, a sh sound. And the same is true for, so it says in Sefer Yetzirah explicitly, the same is true for the resh. The tongue has to be behind the front teeth, and this is how you pronounce the resh. If it were correct, if it were true that the resh is to be pronounced from the back of the throat, which is the usual Ashkenazi pronunciation, that is to say, a resh, as it is usually pronounced by most speakers of modern Hebrew, but not all, I should add. Many people do pronounce the resh correctly in modern Hebrew speech as well, but a majority of people do not. They pronounce it as a resh from the back of the throat, similar in many ways to a French R. Well, this has nothing to do with the tip of the tongue and the back of the teeth. This has to do with the back of the tongue and the throat, and that is a separate group of letters defined by Sefer Yetzirah as the letters Gimel, Yod, Chaf, and Qoph, and they are all pronounced from the back of the throat. So this is a clear and incontrovertible piece of evidence that the resh is to be pronounced as a resh and not as a resh. Following the resh, we have the shin. The shin, of course, is the sh sound in English, or the ch sound in French, a sh, and the letter sh with the dot on the right is the sh. When the dot is on the left, on the top of the letter on the left, it is a s. Instead of a sh, it is a s. Also a simple, straightforward s sound. This raises, of course, the question which many would ask at this point. In that case, here you are admitting that there are 2 letters in the Hebrew language with the same pronunciation, samech and sin. And the fact of the matter is that this is true. They do have the same pronunciation. Nobody today can tell you that they know of any distinction between these 2 letters in terms of their pronunciation. However, it is also true that it is very dubious, in fact, whether at any time in history there was such a distinction. In fact, it's not clear whether, going back to very ancient times, biblical times, there were these 2 separate letters. And perhaps there was originally just the 1 letter for all instances of the consonant s. And for reasons which are less than clear and much debated amongst academicians, for some reason these two symbols for the s sound appeared. But to claim that there is definitely a different, a distinct pronunciation for the samach as opposed to the sin, this is not based on any factual information whatever, and we see throughout, both in the Tanakh itself and later in the literature of Hazal, that the samach and the sin are entirely interchangeable. So where we have the word heres in the Torah, which means earthenware, heres was written in the Torah, is written with a sin. In Hazalic text is usually written with a samach, but there are also instances of words in the Tanakh themselves which appear with once with the sin and once with the samach. So it appears clear that there is no difference between these two letters, and at any rate this is the only instance of two letters with the same pronunciation. And the last letter of the alphabet is the tau, sometimes pronounced incorrectly as a tav or a taf, but correctly pronounced as a tau. The t with a dot, with a daresh, the tau derusha, is simply a t, a straightforward t sound, as in English or other languages. And without the dot, the tau refuya is a th sound, an unvoiced th, as in the English word through, or similar words where you have a th which is unvoiced, as opposed to a voiced th, which is a the. There is a difference, of course, in the th in the definite article the, and the th in the word through. One is the and one is th. The th is the th sound of a tau without a dot, and the sound, the voiced th, is the daled, as we explained, is the daled without the dot. The Hebrew word for the seventh day of the week, which is Shabbat, and we have, of course, the English equivalent, which is Sabbath, and there is a very clear and obvious reason why Sabbath is written with a th and pronounced as it is written, Sabbath, and not Sabbat or Sabbat or something like that. And the same is true for example, the name Nathan. In Hebrew, when mispronounced, the name would be, perhaps, depending on how you pronounce Hebrew, would be Natan or Noson or what have you. The correct pronunciation of the name is Nathan, and there is a very powerful and obvious reason why the name in English is written as Nathan with a th. These are not mistakes, these are not anomalies, these are factual and historical proof that this is the correct pronunciation of that letter. The reason it became mispronounced or unpronounced by different certain sections of the Jewish world is because the ability to pronounce the th sound was lost in some parts of the Jewish world, and they just pronounced the tau with a dot as they pronounce the tau, without a dot as they do the tau with a dot, therefore it remained t, a t sound, which is closer to the truth. And in other parts of the Hebrew-speaking world, the Jewish world, the inability to pronounce the th led them to pronounce it as something close to th, which is s. You will note, for example, that many Israelis who do not pronounce English very well, when they say, instead of saying I think, they say I sink. There's a reason for that, because the s phonetically is closer to the th, to the th sound, than many other consonants. So the brain automatically picks some consonant which is close, and that is the one that many people will close. That is the one that many will choose, I should say, and so on. But there is no doubt that the correct pronunciation is the th, unvoiced th, as in the word through. Another couple of examples that come to mind are the internationally known organization B'nai B'rith, which is written in that way for a very straightforward reason, as we've explained, because that is the correct pronunciation. The word is B'rith in Hebrew, and that is how it was transliterated very correctly. And we also see this in Israel in many street signs and highway signs. The names of words like Avoth, a street nearby here is called Yemin Avoth, and is written in that fashion, transliterated with a th in English on the street sign. The same is true for many other highway signs in Israel, referring to places like Beth Shemesh, And one can see this regarding other letters, such as Petah, Tikwa, where the waw is represented as a W very correctly, etc. In other words, in the realm of officialdom, which is somehow, to some extent, aware of these facts, the correct pronunciation is reflected even in the official written documentation and signposting of the state. So, in summation, we have 6 consonantal sounds from Qoph to the end of the alphabet. That is to say, we have Qoph, Resh, Shin, Sin, Tau, and Thau, 6 consonants, and out of those, 3, half, that is to say, 50%, are commonly mispronounced. That is to say, the Qoph, which is often mispronounced as a kaf, and the Resh, which is frequently mispronounced, particularly by Ashkenazim, as a Resh from the throat, a guttural R, Resh, instead of Resh, and we have the Thau, the TH, the unvoiced TH of the letter Tau without a dot, the Tau Refuya. So that is 50% of those consonants that are often mispronounced.
Thank you, Rabbi Bar-Hayim. We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends. We would also like to suggest the following opportunity to our viewers. If you identify with Rabbi Bar-Hayim's message and would like to sponsor or dedicate a video interview with the Rabbi in honor or memory of a loved one, if you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the Rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.